Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and today it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. We know we went over the hour mark, I should say, in our last few videos. So today we're just going to recap some of the news that broke, some extensions, the Yankees Mets talk. The Yankees are playing in the Field of Dreams game later tonight, so that'll be a lot of fun to watch. But before we get into this short episode, Swig, I want to know how you doing.
Well, I'm doing fantastic. I'm very proud of the last couple episodes we did. They were amazing, and anyone who hasn't listened yet should go back and do that. But we all saw the craziness of all the moving parts that have happened in baseball, basketball, and hockey the last few weeks. So now that the most of that is over, it's nice to finally just get back to a normal pace here a little bit. We can look at less things, but analyze them a little bit more, and also I can go to bed earlier, so that'll be nice too.
Yeah, and that's a good point there. Looking at the last few episodes, they were long, but they were very insightful. The NBA draft won a lot of picks. Were correct and had a lot of weight that went into some of those thought processes. So the NBA draft deep dive was really good. And then you look over at our last episode with all the transactions, we broke down everything. So if you want to know about Seth Jones, if you want to know about the Cubs disaster of trading everybody or whatever that happened, anything like that, head on over to that one, check that out. But some news broke, and I want to get into the first extension that we want to talk about, and that's Igor Shesterkin. You got the Rangers hat on today. The young goaltender got 4 years, $22 million to be the man between the pipes there for the next 4 years in New York. How do you feel about it?
I like it. I really do like this one. It's one of the few things I can unequivocally say that about with the Rangers this offseason. And there's a couple of lines of thinking that go into why he was given the extension. So for anyone who doesn't know, Shesterkin's only been this past season was his first and so far only full-time season as the starter with the Rangers. When he came up the season before, he had about 2 months before the COVID thing shut everything down. And for those 2 months, he was part of a 3-goalie system with Georgiev and Henrik Lundqvist. So the playing time is a little bit inconsistent there. So the short version is he's only played 47 NHL games so far. They've been very good NHL games, but he hasn't had a lot of experience. But since he has played well, and since we've seen this in the past, what this allows the Rangers to do, Shesterkin had 2 years left where he was arbitration eligible and a restricted free agent. So what the Rangers have done a lot in the past with a lot of players is give them what's called a bridge contract, where they would have gotten a contract for those 2 seasons that they were arbitration eligible, and then they would have been unrestricted free agents then when they were only going to be more expensive to keep. What the Rangers did now by signing him to a 4-year deal is they bought out 2 seasons where he would have been an unrestricted free agent. And if he continues to get better and play well, which there's definitely a good possibility of that happening, the 5.7 million a year or so that he ended up with is going to look like a bargain. Now, that 4 years is not a super long-term deal. So hopefully in an ideal world, he will be worth another big contract then, but it's still smarter I think, to lock him up for 4 years now, have that just one piece of the puzzle solved, because the Rangers have envisioned him as the goalie of the future for a long time, and this cements that move.
I love when teams look at young talent and see, hey, I could get them for a long time. I know there's arbitration. You can get them on team-friendly contracts, whether it's 600,000 or anything like that, to where you could sort of lowball them in a sense. But if you see someone that you could get some of their unrestricted free agent years as beneficial to you on a bargain, that makes up for what you could pay in arbitration. So I think it's a great move to sign a goaltender like Igor Shesterkin behind a well-improved young defense. I think that all comes together in a tandem where they're going to be solid defensively, even with the goaltender for the next 4 years. I mean, just think about it. They're in a good spot. They have a lot of young talent on that team. And I think he could bring a lot to the table. I draw the comparison to, I don't like paying guys in any sport. I don't like paying guys if I haven't seen them do it at least once. And that's what I saw the Atlanta Braves do when they paid Acuna and Albies. They saw him do it once. They gave him the contract extensions, which are very favorable right now. And if you look at someone like a Scott Kingery, who the Phillies paid, he's been a bust absolutely right now. So I think in the hockey world, you look at Igor Shesterkin, young player, produced well. You got a good, solid contract on him, and he could definitely provide some value for this Rangers team down the stretch.
That's what I'm hoping to see, honestly. I think in hockey, a comparable that you can look at that was signed a day or two before was the Flyers with Carter Hart, who
Yeah.
struggled mightily last season, but is still a young, talented goalie who was signed with a 3-year deal. I want to say about $4 million a season. So even if he does continue to struggle, which I don't think he will, I think he's too talented for that. Although having Rasmus Ristolainen in front of him now isn't going to help. But I do think that was a risk worth taking for the Flyers, because even if he flops, it's a tradable contract that it won't completely hamstring them salary cap wise. I think the similar logic applies to the Rangers in terms of if something unforeseen happens where Shesterkin is not worth this contract or something drastic changes, it won't be completely impossible to unload it. But obviously that's not the thought process behind signing him. It's getting a young, talented player locked up for a couple extra years right away, rather than waiting and making it more expensive to do so later. There's always risk involved there. And the Rangers defense should be relatively stable. The top four of Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren on one pair, and Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba on the second should be remain intact. That third pair this year is probably going to be Patrick Nemeth and Niels Lundqvist, who's coming over from Sweden and should be ready to step in on that third pair. And we saw Miller step in and have a lot of success as a rookie. We saw Adam Fox win the Norris Trophy in a second season. So no pressure for Niels Lundqvist to live up to anything there, but it should be a much more stable defense than we saw a couple of seasons ago. And that should definitely help Shesterkin and whoever backs him up in a lot, helps them out a lot in between the pipes.
Yeah, and we talk about a young player getting an extension for doing it for one season, definitely getting a nice thing going on there. Let's look at the Islanders, who paid someone who has been doing it for a while, and that's Adam Pelech, who has really came on defensively for them. He got a pretty long contract, well-deserved in my opinion. 8 years, $46 million. That's a pretty nice penny for Adam Pelech, especially in the hockey world with the way the money works. I think Pelech, he deserved this contract 100%. He's a big part of their defense and what they do under Barry Trotz. I love this deal.
Yeah, Pelech ended up getting $5.75 million per for 8 seasons, which is the longest contract that NHL players can sign. They can sign 8 years if they re-sign with the team they were with, and they can get up to 7 if they sign anywhere else. So I think Adam Pelech ended up taking a little bit less money per year for the longer term. I think if he signed a 5 or 6 year deal, which still would have been reasonable, he would have gotten probably 6 or 6.5 million or something like that. But he ended up taking a little bit less so he could stay with the Islanders long term. So you knew that he was going to be kept around. He was one of the league's best defensemen last year in his own zone and on the penalty kill. I know that this is a long-term contract, but to me, this one made a lot more sense than some of the other ones that we may have mentioned on last week's show.
Oh.
And I think that, and I think part of the reason the Islanders were able to get Pelech for a cheaper price is because he does not really have a lot of offense to his game. He is exclusively even strength and penalty kill, but he plays that role extraordinarily well. And we talked about the Islanders hadn't really announced any of their re-signing any of their players, waiting for them to make a move. They haven't really made any big blockbusters yet or anything. So I'm wondering if some of their other signings are going to start getting announced here now that Pelech has been extended.
That makes sense. You lock up your main guy, and then just if the Tarasenko thing doesn't happen, you hinted to last week, I think you could still find a way to just bring your old players back and make another run, because they're a great hockey team. Everything's working well. I want to bring up Seth Jones one more time. I know you teased him a little bit. I think right now, Adam Pelech, you know what you're going to get, but that could be a bad deal as the contract lingers on towards the end. I personally believe Seth Jones, on the other hand, has the upside to where he has more upside in that deal that he signed, as opposed to Adam Pelech, who, you know what you're going to get. He's a nice, phenomenal defenseman right now, but the way his play style is, I think his lingers a little bit worse than Seth Jones on that end.
There's less upside in terms of his scoring potential, but I also think there's less risk. Now, if he plays physically, he could start to break down. We've seen that with guys like Dan Girardi before, who are good for a really long time, then kind of hit a brick wall physically and aren't very useful after that point. But even if that doesn't happen to Seth Jones, the risk with his contract is way higher. And Pelech, even at his worst, is a more consistent player, I'd say, than Seth Jones is, especially in his own zone. And he's making almost $4 million less a season. So contract wise, it won't be quite as damaging to the Islanders salary cap. It's funny you brought him up because Pelech is the latest in a string of extensions we've seen for defensemen around the league. And you compare some of these other players and Pelech's making significantly less. Now, I'm not saying that he is in the league of a Cale Makar, for example. That one's obvious, but you compare him to a guy like Seth Jones, who actually made more money than Makar did. You can at least agree that's undeserved, right?
Right.
But outside of him, you look at guys like Darnell Nurse, who just got $9.25 million a year. You could look at Zach Werenski. You could look at Dougie Hamilton, or you could look at Jones himself. And which of these deals have the least risk involved? None of them are perfect, but some of these players like Makar and Hamilton, I think, make the most sense to give the money to right now. They're clearly some of the best defensemen in the league. And Pelech is one of the best at what he does. But you look at a Seth Jones, or to a lesser extent, a Werenski, and it just doesn't quite make that same sense. And there's more risk involved. I think for the Islanders, it makes sense. I think Pelech and Polak will end up being that top pair for a while. I do think that this contract, like most 8-year deals, will eventually become a problem. But if he's still a good player for the first 4 or 5 seasons, it'll be well worth it.
That's fair. I look at it as Seth Jones could potentially you're taking a risk on his front. So a lot to look at with him.
You're trying to justify a contract that scares the hell out of you. Just say it.
Yeah, I'm feeling worse and worse about it each day. But as I put my head on the pillow, I need to know that it's going to work out. So I just try to justify it. That's all you can do. You're going to be feeling good putting your head on the pillow because Julius Randle finally got a nice contract. I don't know. He could have probably gotten more if he duplicated what he did last year next season, but it's sort of a spot where you're paying him off a good year. And I think I like it. I think the Knicks, he really saw an impact with Tom Thibodeau there. I love the deal. 3 for $62 for Julius Randle to stay in New York.
Well, I always sleep well because I have to drink myself to sleep after watching my teams. And that
Nice.
helps you. That helps you just fall asleep quickly. Now, the next morning, well, now that's a different story. But with the Knicks, Randle actually signed a 4-year extension for $117 million. This upcoming season is the last year of the original deal he signed with the Knicks. This would be his 3rd season. The Knicks had a team option, which they were obviously going to pick up considering how he played last season. Now, Randle signing the extension now compared to after next season is really interesting and why I think it's a better deal. So 4 for $117 on top of the $23 million I think he would have made this season, or still is making this season, is the most he could have signed right now. If he waited until after next season and did happen to have another all-star year, a max contract would have cost about $200 million over 5 years to bring him back. So it's a relative bargain. Now, if anyone's listening and you're like, well, okay, so Shesterkin and Pelech get a little under $6 million a year. Oh, here comes Julius Randle getting about 27. Yeah, the economics of hockey compared to basketball or baseball or football are very different. But Randle left money on the table willingly because he's committing to a team that's committed to him, that's looked significantly more competent in the last year or so after a long stretch of ineptitude, right? And I'm hoping that it sends a message that so first of all, I'm hoping it shows that he's giving the flexibility. By taking less money, there's more salary cap space available theoretically to improve the team around him, right? So we don't know, hopefully with the core the Knicks have right now, or possibly with whoever becomes available down the line. But it's also just showing, I'm hoping it sends a message to the rest of the league that the Knicks are building something worth joining or worth appreciating. And that might send a strong message around the league, because as much as Randle played well, is he likely to replicate what he did this past season? I would argue no. But players who play like he did last season do not come cheap. And he right now has the 39th highest salary per year in the NBA. Considering everything, that's a relative bargain, and that 39th is only going to get lower as more people sign big contracts. We just saw Luka Doncic and Trae Young do it over the weekend, for example. So is it perfect? No, but it should lead to some more stability with the Knicks, and it should be a relatively decent value considering how much production he had last season.
That's a solid breakdown. I don't really have too much to add to it, but I am looking at the logistics of the contract. I do apologize. 4 for 117 is the deal. And the way it's going, 23, he's getting 23. 20 and 23, 24, he's getting 25. Then in year 3, he's getting 27, and it's sort of backloaded. He gets 29 million, close to 30 in that final year of the contract at 30 years old. So it seems like it's going up as the deal goes on. Could potentially give them some flex cap space to potentially sign a big star with the low money he's owed over the next few seasons. It's still not low by any stretch of the imagination, but it still gives them enough to where you backload him. You could bring someone in on a lower deal and still get some production out of them.
Well, and that's the idea with the Kemba Walker signing that the Knicks made. The Randle extension was announced the next morning after we recorded last week's show. So the timing there wasn't perfect. But the contract breakdown like that, these players do usually get a little bit more each year in the contract. Because I believe the max contract works as a percentage of the salary cap. And the salary cap usually goes up a little bit every year with TV revenues. It's a lot of math. But the short version is a little bit more money to spend. He's worth the same percentage, but that percentage is going to be worth a little bit more money as the salary cap increases. So it's not a perfect or risk-free contract or anything. I still stand by Randle is unlikely to replicate or improve on what he did last season. But if he comes anywhere close, it's still going to be a solid deal, all things considered. It could be a lot worse. Hell, we've seen a lot worse fucking albatrosses from the Knicks over the years. I mean, they paid Tim Hardaway Jr. $72 million, for example. And that's just one of about 24 I could mention off the top of my head.
Yeah, big contracts were a thing of the past for the Knicks, so hopefully this one's a little bit better. Big contracts are the thing of the present with the New York Yankees, and they have been playing some baseball right now where it seems like everybody is out, whether with injury or the COVID issues. Players on the COVID list right now, Garrett Cole, Anthony Rizzo, and Gary Sanchez. I believe Cole's coming back. Those are just the big 3 names. You're also missing players like the left fielder Clint Frazier, who's missed some time. Luke Voit finally came back. So the Yankees just trying to piece it together right now. Jameson Taillon's look fantastic down the stretch. But what have you seen out of this Yankees team?
Well, first of all, regarding the injuries, like I know the COVID wrinkle is relatively new. This is the second season we're seeing that, but how many years in a row did the Yankees lose the entire damn roster to injuries or illnesses or whatever the hell? It's every single season, man. Jordan Montgomery is on the COVID list too. And so is the Clay Holmes, the reliever they just got from Pittsburgh. And then injury wise, he didn't even mention Aroldis Chapman or Gleyber Torres or Gio Urshela or Miguel Andujar or several other people. I mean, we could talk, Domingo Germán just got injured. The starting rotation right now is 4 players. Only one of them was even on the Yankees to start the season, and that's Taillon. And the 5th starter right now is just a bullpen game. We've had to do that twice now. So the injuries have been insane. They don't stop. That and the COVID tests, but somehow the Yankees have played much better baseball recently, despite all that. Now, they still have a tendency to not make it easy on themselves, even when they do win. And if there's any game that sums that up better than the wild game against the Royals the other night, I haven't seen it yet, but they've managed to get closer in the wild card race. There's still a couple games out, but if they're going to try to make the wild card, which is clearly the target for this season, they're going to have to keep this up, frankly, and hopefully getting some injured or ill players back in the next couple of weeks will help with that.
Blue Jays are chasing their ass too. The Blue Jays have played some phenomenal baseball as of late. Boston sort of hit a slide. They did put up 20 today. You thought Tom Brady was back in Boston with the high football scores put up there. But I mean, it seems like Boston's sort of falling apart right now with the way that their rotation, they didn't add anything at the deadline. So it seems like they really didn't go in. And it's a nice spot for the Yankees. If they can get healthy, if they can get Corey Kluber back, if they can, I know it's a lot of ifs with this Yankees team, but they're still finding a way to compete and win some of these games. It's going to be a pivotal pivotal series coming up against the Chicago White Sox, which we'll get into next week, recapping what took place there. But the Yankees, I mean, you mentioned it Monday night, and I saw a graphic on the screen. I don't know if I was watching the Royals or the Yankees broadcast, but it said the first time since 1900 that the teams matched the score of the inning for like 3-4 straight innings, where the Yankees put up a 3 spot. You're like, all right, it's over. They got a 3-run lead. No, the Royals came back, made it 3. I'm sitting there. I had money on the game. I'm sitting here like, you have to be freaking kidding me. It doesn't matter who they're bringing in, whether it's Wandy Peralta or God knows who out of the bullpen. They're blowing the game, but it's not enough to lose the game. Then you come out and finally win because someone gets popped in the head with a ground ball. So it was a crazy ball game.
That was just absolutely batshit, man. Even by Yankees standards, you could point to so many games that they've inexcusably lost, or even some of the ones they've held on to where it's taken them a couple innings too long or made more dramatic than it needs to. But whatever, they managed to take 2 out of 3 from Kansas City. The schedule gets much tougher, so it seems like these Yankees players are disappearing into the field of corn that we're going to see on TV tomorrow night. But it's not the White Sox series that I think is the most pivotal. The Yankees have 3 games against Boston next week. I think that's going to be more important, frankly. If the Yankees have another bad series against the Red Sox, and I'll believe that won't happen when I see it, frankly. They've given me no reason to believe that they'll win 2 out of 3 in that series. But if they don't, if they have another bad series, they're going to be right back 4 or 5 games out. Toronto's going to be in front of us. There's just very little margin for error as we get deeper and deeper into the season. So while the Yankees have been better of late, and it's nice to see them on a decent stretch here, especially considering how many players are out, it's very, how do I put it? This could all change or be ruined with one bad series. And there's not really a better team to represent that than a series against the Red Sox. So there's a lot of moving parts. They've been playing better. The pitching rotation, I think one guy we haven't mentioned in a while is Luis Severino. He should be getting close. He had a very good rehab outing in the minor leagues the other day. I think he threw 4 perfect innings. He's getting there. So he's a complete wild card. And you have guys that you would assume would be coming off the COVID list within the next week or two, and that should help. But it's insane, man. And I still think there's a good chance that Toronto will just end up passing everybody.
Yeah, that's a very realistic possibility. They added Jose Barrios and they're swinging the bat. So back in Toronto, they're playing good baseball. I think the Yankees, you hit it hard there. The tough schedule coming up. Everybody, I hope you go and watch the game tonight on Fox. That's the Field of Dreams game, obviously. A lot of good history going on there. But speaking of history, the Mets are history. Let's stop it right there. They're done. Their season's over. I'm sick and tired of hearing the Mets this, the Mets that. And I put my right hand up, left hand. Let me put my right hand up and say that I was one of the people that believed in this Mets team. And I said they weren't just good on paper. They're good on the field. Well, they have not been good on the field as of late. Who was that? Taiwan Walker has been absolutely horrendous in the second half of the season. His ERA is north of 12. And it's absolutely nuts the way this Mets team cannot find any sort of stability. Everyone's injured. When they come back, they're not good enough. I thought, okay, get the offense time to come back. You're going to gel. You're going to do well. It hasn't happened. They're left, right, switch left, right, like a great lineup going top to bottom with left, right hitters, with good hitters, but they're not hitting and they're not getting run support when they pitch well. It's an absolute disaster. And I believe the Mets are finished.
It's kind of interesting to hear you say that their history, that their season's over. You sound like me talking about one of my own teams. The Mets are definitely in the middle of their worst stretch of the season, and I'm not complaining about that. But damn, man, you give up quick, and that's coming from me.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to throw in the towel on them just yet, but they are definitely in some trouble. But if you're going to talk about the injuries, if there's one thing I'm not going to feel any sympathy for, considering the state of the Yankees roster we just went over, it's if a team is injured. I don't want to hear it. Now, the Mets are now in 3rd place in the National League East. They did have a nice comeback win earlier today over the Nationals, but yeah, they've been struggling mightily. The offense has been bad most of the season, if not all of the season. And the pitching staff, which has been the strength of the Mets for years, has struggled big time since the All-Star break. Walker has been a shit show since then, but had an amazing first half of the season. But I mean, I get what you're saying. The Mets also have a really tough schedule coming up. They have series against San Francisco and the Dodgers. If
Yeah.
they end up losing 5 out of 6, 5 out of 7, whatever, however many games it is, that could bury them in the division with the red hot Phillies, who won 8 straight recently. But I'm not ready to throw in the towel just yet. But if they don't get their heads out of their ass soon, then I'm going to be more willing to see your point.
And they also have, not only do they have Giants Dodgers coming up, they got the Giants again the following week. So they have a murder's row of schedule coming up for the New York Mets. It's not looking good with the way that they're playing baseball right now. I mean, it's crucial. I'm reading right here. Dodgers, Phillies, Dodgers, or not Phillies, Dodgers, Giants, Dodgers, Giants. It's the next 2 weeks they play. Then they got Washington, Miami, Washington, good enough. Yankees, Cardinals are decent. Phillies, Boston, Milwaukee, Atlanta to end out the season. So they are in a bad spot. And I don't think the Phillies are letting up. Zach Wheeler, a former Met product, he's definitely looked pretty good for the Phillies. They added Kyle Gibson. I think the Phillies are in great shape. And the Mets, I'm kicking the can in on them. I think they're finished.
Oh, well, first of all, I'm not going to remember that whole schedule off the top of my head that you just rattled off. Um, but Zach Wheeler actually threw a complete game shutout against the Mets the other day to finish off a stretch where the Mets went 1-6 against the Marlins and the Phillies, which is not ideal for them considering that their schedule is going to be tougher after that. So I definitely see the point you're making. I do think that guys like Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo will hit a little bit better here. I mean, there's got to be some regression to the mean at some point, but the rotation is my bigger concern right now. We talked about the wild card. Carlos Carrasco is just coming back. Walker, I still think is better than how he's pitched the last few starts. I don't think he's quite the pitcher he was for the first half of the season either. I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere. But considering Jacob deGrom and Francisco Lindor aren't coming back anytime soon, you don't see too much hope for it to all of a sudden course correct, because this Mets team was the only one over 500 in their division for a solid 2 months. But now that Philadelphia and the Braves, even without Acuna, have finally broken through that, the Mets are, while they're only a game and a half back, they're in third place now. And the wild card hunt is just not realistic for them. The National League West is going to take both of the wild card spots, I think. So if they're going to make the playoffs, they need to win their division. And if they don't start pitching better, they're not going to have any chance of doing that because the offense is not capable of carrying them to a division title.
Don't sleep on the Reds. Don't sleep on the Reds. They're about 10 games over 500 right now. The Padres in the month of September play 1 game against the Diamondbacks. Outside of that, every single team they play is over 500. They don't have Tatis. I think the Reds could be taking that second wild card spot against the Dodgers team or Giants team, whoever finishes second. But that's just how I feel. I think the Mets are in bad shape right now. The Yankees, I think, could still direct their own path if they can get healthy. But yeah, that's how I feel. You got any obliges to that situation?
Well, if the Reds do end up making it into one of the wild card, we can at least agree that it's not going to come from the National League East then. Okay.
Right,
we want to be such a smart ass about it.
Right. You got to give the Reds credit though. I mean, they've been all right. So we'll give them some.
Oh yeah, no problem there. Yeah, it's definitely a tough stretch for the Mets. I hope, as a completely unbiased Yankees fan, of course, that it continues. But I think the Mets are still too talented to struggle like this for the entire season. Now, the pitching staff, like if they don't become one of the league's top rotations again, they won't be able to consistently win games. Though they might just be an average up and down team, and that probably won't be good enough for them in a pennant race.
It won't. It's going to be tough. So tough riding out there with the New York Mets. Tune in tonight. Like I said, the Yankees. That's going to be a lot of fun watching the Field of Dreams. It's one of my favorite movies. I actually just watched it a few hours ago just to get riled up for this. And I wish I could see Shoeless Joe Jackson out there, but obviously he is not available off the bench for either team for the White Sox. So that's not going to happen tomorrow. But I'm excited for it. Lance Lynn's taking the ball against Andrew Heaney, newly acquired Yankee. Are you excited about it?
I'm excited about the game. I'm not excited about that pitching matchup. I think that is pretty favorable to the White Sox. And if I'm being honest, I don't know how many people are going to get that Shoeless Joe Jackson reference besides us, but I like what you were going for. Tell them to watch 8 Men Out if they want to understand that one a little bit better.
Yeah, Shoeless Joe Jackson played the game without shoes one time, and he got the nickname. So that's what happened. He lost his spikes, I believe, or his spikes were hurting his feet, so he played the rest of the game with socks on. So it's sort of like Shoelace, Denard Robinson. So definitely a nice little comparison there.
Well, hopefully both of them will appear randomly from that field of corn in Iowa, and that would be some interesting television.
It would. That's going to do it for today, though. I appreciate everyone that tuned in. We haven't talked any NFL yet, but that should be coming up here in the next few weeks. I know we got preseason starting. Zach Wilson hasn't looked the best in camp. Big quarterback controversy with Justin Fields. Andy Dalton, we'll touch on all that. There's fists flying in New York. We'll see what else is going on with the Giants camp. But we're gonna break down that. We'll also recap the Yankees White Sox series. I appreciate everyone that tuned in. Be sure to check us out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, all that good stuff. Click like, click subscribe, leave a review, all that stuff. And until next time, for Swig, I am Dylan Kearns. This is the Big City Sports Podcast.